The place where I'm just standing here is the city wall, the rampart of ancient Charax, which is a city in southern Iraq, and it was situated close to the Gulf in antiquity, and for about 1,000 years it was the most important harbor on the Gulf. It was founded by Alexander the Great. The city was refounded later by Hyspaosines. He was the governor of southern Iraq and much of the Gulf area in the mid of the 2nd century BC.
There is a specific coordinate on the border of Iran and Iraq that, for decades, was one of the most dangerous places on Earth. If you pull up a standard satellite view of this region right now, you will see nothing but a desolate, monochromatic stretch of sand near the confluence of the Tigris and Karun rivers. To the naked eye, this is a geographical dead zone. It is a wasteland where the horizon blurs into a haze of heat and dust. The official topographical maps label this area simply as Jebel Khayyabr. For the last 2,000 years, authorities, historians, and geologists have agreed on a single, indisputable fact: nothing survives here. The environment is too hostile, the water is too scarce, and the sand covers everything. But the maps were wrong. In 2016, a team led by Dr. Stefan Hauser from the University of Konstanz returned to these exact coordinates. They didn't bring shovels. They didn't bring excavators. They brought a device that changes how we see history: a cesium magnetometer. This technology does not look at the surface. It ignores the sand, the dirt, and the debris. Instead, it peers into the subsurface layers of the Earth to detect minute magnetic anomalies in the soil density. It hunts for the ghosts of disturbed Earth places where humans packed down the soil, built walls, or dug foundations thousands of years ago. When the team calibrated the sensors and ran the scan over this empty desert, the screen didn't show the random noise of nature. It showed a grid, and not just a small settlement or a temporary outpost. The monitor lit up with the glowing, hard-edged geometry of a metropolitan sprawl. The data revealed massive, clearly defined city walls rising 8 meters high. It showed a dense, sophisticated network of residential districts. It mapped out the electromagnetic footprints of temples, industrial zones, and palaces. And perhaps most shockingly, it traced the lines of a hydraulic irrigation system so complex it rivals modern civil engineering. The data suggests this was a megacity housing between 400,000 and 600,000 people. You need to pause and process that number, 400,000 people. To put that into perspective, that is a population larger than modern-day Manchester, Miami, or Zurich. In the ancient world, this wasn't just a city. It was a demographic titan. It was a thriving industrial superpower equal in scale and majesty to the legendary Alexandria in Egypt. It was a hub where the wealth of the East met the hunger of the West. Yet, for 17 centuries, it has been completely absent from our history books. It has been missing from our maps. It has been invisible. The mainstream narrative tells us a very specific, very confident story about Alexander the Great. We are taught that after toppling the Persian Empire in the 4th century BCE, he founded cities to consolidate his power, most famously, Alexandria on the Nile. Authorities claim that his eastern capital, the legendary Alexandria on the Tigris, was a mystery. They describe it as a lost outpost that faded into the myth of the desert. That is a lie. It was never a mystery. It was never lost. We knew exactly where it was for nearly 70 years. In the 1960s, the Cold War was reshaping the Middle East, and the skies above the Iran-Iraq border were patrolled by surveillance aircraft. A British researcher named John Hansman gained access to a set of classified aerial reconnaissance photographs taken by the Royal Air Force. These were not archaeological surveys. They were military intelligence scans designed to spot troop movements and artillery placements. But Hansman wasn't looking for tanks. He was looking at the grain of the film. He noticed something unnatural in the topography near Jebel Khayyabr. He saw the shadows of ramparts. He saw the rigid, unmistakable geometry of a master-planned city protruding from the earth. The sunlight hitting the desert floor at just the right angle revealed the faint outlines of a civilization that was supposed to be a myth. Hansman did the math. He marked the coordinates. He wrote down the location. He effectively told the academic community, "It's right here, the lost city is sitting on the surface." The response was absolute silence. Why? Because discovery requires access. And this city was sitting in the throat of a geopolitical kill zone. For decades, the region surrounding Jebel Kayaber was a no-man's land of artillery fire, minefields, and escalating political tension between Iran and Iraq. The city of Alexandria on the Tigris, later renamed Charax, wasn't buried by sand. It was buried by modern warfare. It was held hostage by history, while the public was told the city was a legend. The physical evidence sat exposed, baking in the sun, waiting for anyone brave enough or foolish enough to cross the firing line. In 2014, the geopolitical window finally cracked open. Guided by local authorities who knew the terrain, a team of archaeologists managed to access the site on foot. They were the first researchers to stand in the center of the city in generations. What they found wasn't just ruins. They found the corpse of a global superpower. Dr. Bosit Hauser stated, "We were astonished by what we saw. They didn't need to dig. They didn't need to brush away centuries of dirt. The city walls were still standing 8 meters tall against the horizon. Think about the durability required for a mud brick wall to stand 8 meters high after 2,000 years of erosion, rain, and wind. This speaks to a construction quality that borders on the industrial. But to truly understand the sheer magnitude of this place, you have to look at the survey process itself. The team didn't just visit 1 or 2 spots. They conducted a forensic audit of the landscape. They walked survey lines back and forth across the site, covering a total distance of over 500 kilometers. Imagine walking from London to Paris. Now imagine that for every single step of that journey, you are crushing pottery shards, broken bricks, and glass beneath your boots. That is what the team experienced. For 500 kilometers of walking, they documented a continuous, unbroken carpet of human debris. This intense density of artifacts proves that the settlement was not just large. It was densely packed. It was loud. It was busy. They found shards of high-quality pottery. They found evidence of imported goods. They found the trash and the treasures of 600,000 lives. But this discovery creates a massive, glaring contradiction in the historical record. If this city was so massive a trade hub connecting the silk of China, the spices of India, and the gold of Rome, how does it just die? Megacities do not simply vanish. They are usually destroyed by a singular, violent event. Rome burned. Pompeii was buried by ash. Hiroshima was leveled by the atom. Carthage was salted. When a city of 600,000 people disappears, there is usually a body. There is usually a layer of ash, or a mass grave, or the scars of a great siege. But the magnetometry scans at Charax revealed something much more disturbing. There was no evidence of a single cataclysmic war that ended it all. There was no sudden fire that consumed the grid. The city didn't lose its army. It didn't lose its money. It lost its physics. The data from the University of Konstanz reveals a terrifying reality about the fragility of human civilization. The city was murdered by the very thing that gave it life, the river. The source material confirms that the Tigris River moved. We are not talking about a seasonal fluctuation. We are not talking about a bad harvest. We are talking about a geological betrayal. The sedimentation from the river was so intense, so rapid, and so relentless that it physically pushed the coastline away. When Alexander the Great ordered the construction of this city in the 4th century BCE, he chose the location with military precision. It was situated less than 2 kilometers from the open waters of the Persian Gulf. It was the perfect maritime trap. Any ship coming from India with spices or from China with silk had to dock here. It was the bottleneck of the ancient economy. The harbor was the city's lungs. It breathed in trade and breathed out wealth. But the environment is not static. The Tigris carries a massive load of silt mud, sand, and dissolved earth from the mountains. Year after year, the river vomited this silt into the delta. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the land began to grow. The coastline started to migrate outward. The scans of the northern sector of the city revealed the moment the population realized they were doomed. Archaeologists uncovered a huge irrigation network to the north of the residential grid. For years, historians might have looked at this and seen simple farming. But in the context of the magnetometry data, it looks like panic. This wasn't just farming. This was a desperate, massive engineering attempt to force the water to obey. We're looking at a civilization of 500,000 people, clawing at the earth, digging deeper channels, building higher dikes, trying to re-engineer their own geography to stay connected to the sea. They were fighting the planet, and they failed. The river didn't care about their economy. It didn't care about their treaties with the Seleucid Empire or their trade routes with the Mauryan Empire in India. It simply deposited silt, grain by grain, ton by ton, until the physics of the region fundamentally changed. By the 3rd century CE, the ocean was gone. The coastline had moved kilometers away. The harbor, once deep enough for heavy cargo ships, became a marsh, then a mudflat, then dry land. The city was stranded. Imagine the horror of that slow-motion collapse. It wasn't an apocalypse of fire. It was an apocalypse of inconvenience. First, the big ships stop coming. They unload at a new port further south. Then, the merchants leave. The warehouses go empty. Then, the jobs disappear. Then, the water quality drops as the flow stagnates. Finally, the people leave, a city of 600,000 people families. Priests, soldiers, engineers, packed up their lives and walked away, leaving their temples and their palaces to the encroaching sand. They didn't leave because they wanted to. They left because the earth evicted them. The city of Charax suffocated. You cannot hide a city this big without leaving a digital footprint, and now that we have the receipts, the details are staggering. When Dr. Hauser and his team deployed the drones, they weren't just taking pretty pictures. They were compiling a forensic audit of a lost world. The data they pulled from the ground contradicts the modern idea that the ancient world was primitive or organic. The scan data reveals a hyper-organized urban layout. This wasn't a village that grew over time. This was a master plan. The magnetometry shows a dense grid of streets intersecting at perfect 90-degree angles. We are looking at standardized zoning laws enforced 2,000 years ago. The receipts show distinct residential districts separated from industrial zones. The planners knew to keep the smoke and the noise away from the homes. The scans show the electromagnetic footprint of temples, likely dedicated to a fusion of Greek and Mesopotamian gods. They show the foundation signatures of a massive palace complex, the seat of power where satraps and kings once made decisions that affected the known world. And slightly to the north, those heartbreaking irrigation canals. For 50 years, this site was treated less like an archaeological discovery and more like a classified asset. It sat in a geopolitical blind spot, protected by the very war that was supposedly destroying it. And when the scientists finally got their boots on the ground, they realized why this city is so critical to our understanding of history. It is the mirror image of Alexandria in Egypt. Dr. Hauser stated explicitly, "We now realize that we really have the equivalent of Alexandria on the Nile." This confirms a massive gap in our historical model. We have always been obsessed with the West. We study Rome. We study Athens. We study the Library of Alexandria in Egypt. We look at the Mediterranean as the center of the world. But the data from the Tigris proves there was a symmetrical superpower in the East, a second Alexandria. This city was the counterbalance. If Alexandria on the Nile was the brain of the Hellenistic world, Alexandria on the Tigris was the wallet. It was the commercial engine. It was the proof that Alexander's dream of a unified world stretching from Greece to India actually worked, at least for a while. The tragedy is that it didn't fall to a rival empire. It didn't fall to a plague. It fell to the simple, brutal mechanics of sedimentation. The magnetometry doesn't just show walls, it shows the ghostly outline of a coastline that no longer exists. When you look at the drone footage captured by Dr. Hauser's team, those faint, rectangular outlines ghosting through the desert sand, you aren't looking at ancient history. You're looking at a prophecy. The discovery of Alexandria on the Tigris forces us to confront a reality that modern civilization desperately tries to ignore. Geography is not static. We operate under the collective delusion that our maps are permanent. We look at the world map on our wall and we assume it is fixed. We build billion-dollar infrastructures, massive skyscrapers, and coastal megacities on the assumption that the coastline will stay where it is. We assume that the river will always flow to the sea. We assume the harbor will always be deep. The 600,000 citizens of Charax thought the exact same thing. They were the superpower of their age. They had the cesium magnetometer equivalents of their time, the best engineers, the best astronomers, the best mathematicians. They had the backing of the wealthiest empires on Earth. They had a huge irrigation network, specifically designed to master the environment. And it didn't matter. The sediment that buried them is the same sediment moving through our deltas right now. The environmental shifts that isolated them are accelerating in our time. If a city of that magnitude can be deleted from the map so completely that for 1700 years we literally forgot it existed, what chance do we have? The discovery of this lost city isn't just a win for archaeology. It is a warning shot across the bow of the 21st century. The ruins of Geopolitical stand as a monument to the fact that you cannot negotiate with nature. You can only survive it for a little while. Alexander the Great founded this city to last forever. He named it after himself to ensure his legacy was immortal. He placed it at the perfect intersection of water and land. Today, it is dust. So, I want you to answer a question in the comments below. Look at the world map today. When the water shifts, and it will shift, which modern superpower will be the first to become the next lost city? Will it be Miami, as the rising tides reclaim the limestone? Will it be Mumbai, as the monsoon patterns shift? Or will it be Amsterdam, despite all their engineering? Give me your answer below and make sure you're subscribed.